So what's it like to be a Japanese American living in Japan? It's not bad. But I oftentimes get that question asked to me by friends and family or people that I encounter. There's a bit of intrigue behind that. Someone who's Japanese, who was born and raised as an American, whose family is sort of rooted in America after immigrating from Japan, but suddenly someone like me, 4 generations later, decides, you know what? I'm going to take away that assimilation. I'm going to be the foreigner in my motherland now. In fact, I've actually talked about this in my couples channel on A Tale of Two Bays. I talked about the pros and cons of being a Japanese American in Japan, but today I don't want to look at things like pros and cons anymore. Especially cons, like I'm really trying not to look at any sort of negativity or like having that sort of shroud my judgment or my view. Because honestly, living in Japan, it's not a perfect place, of course. Like there's no perfect place for anyone in the world, but it's been pretty good for the most part, and I can't complain too much. So I'm going to approach this more today as things I enjoy about being a Japanese American in Japan and things that I've had to accept. I think that sounds a little bit more balanced. Without further ado, let's start today's video. So, I guess before we really get into it, a little bit of background about me. I am a Yonsei, which is a 4th generation Japanese American. I'm from the San Francisco Bay. I've been in Japan for about 3 years, and I didn't grow up speaking Japanese or having Japanese traditions really heavily embedded into my upbringing, but like a lot of Japanese American folks, I think they can agree that there are things that are there. There are practices that are inevitably going to make their way into your upbringing regardless. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later, but let's start today's video by talking about the things that I enjoy. So the things that I really enjoy about being a Japanese American in Japan is, number one, I blend in physically. Like, just look at me. I look like I belong in a Muji catalog or Uniqlo or something. In fact, I blend in so well in Japan that especially during my first couple of years, I would jump scare the crap out of other Japanese people since I didn't know how to speak the language. Generally speaking, in Japan, since it's such a homogenous country and everybody is Japanese everywhere you go, it's so easy to identify if someone's a foreigner. And I just remember the first time I ever went up to like a hotel and I just spoke directly in English. The look on the girl's face was just like, she was just like in frozen shock for about like 5 seconds, and then suddenly she just like snapped. It just like calculated in her mind like, whoa, wait a minute, okay, this guy's not Japanese. And like I would give these random foreign jump scares, I think, to a lot of Japanese folks, and I still do. In fact, it's not really a jump scare anymore. I think I like to call it a game of chicken now. Since I'm still learning Japanese, it's basically how far can I get into this conversation until finally I have to tap out and call chicken and tell them, ta-da, I'm a foreigner. It's kind of cool that like now where I'm at, I'm able to just blend in. People know how to say my middle name properly. I'll go into a barber shop or get a haircut and the hairstylist is guaranteed to know how to work with my hair and my face complexion. I have that comfort, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, that tourism and overseas travel was barred off. So in the past 2 to 3-ish years, like it's been so obvious if you're a foreigner in Japan, just because everybody is Japanese, even in like the major cities. And so for me, I don't get the stares when I go on the train, when I go into supermarkets, and when I'm just walking around. I find it extremely comforting. It's the only place where physically I blend in, which is cool. The second thing that I really enjoy is I can really enjoy like the food from my culture every day. And everyone's like, duh, like, of course you're in Japan. Like, that's why everybody goes to Japan. But I think what you're missing, the point that I'm trying to make, like, even though I didn't grow up Japanese culturally, my bachan is a way of saying grandma endearingly in Japanese. My bachan on my mom's side, she was from Japan, but she passed away really quickly during my childhood. But my bachan used to make like a lot of really nice dishes and things like that. These recipes got passed down to my aunt and my mom, And they'll make these kind of things for our holiday gatherings from time to time. You can't find these recipes anywhere in America. I don't care how diverse you say the Bay Area is, you are not going to find some of these dishes from Fukuoka in any of these places in America, any restaurant. And so for me, being able to like actually eat and connect with that food from my childhood, from my bachan, you mean to tell me that I can get the food that I only get once a year, like every day now? And for me, there's that's just really special to me. And lastly, sort of tying it all together, like this experience has allowed me to truly connect the dots from my past. Like I said about the food, like there would be dishes I would eat today in Japan I didn't realize that I had eaten before in my childhood, but something would trigger in my mind and I would remember like all these feelings that have once been stored up in your body, like just simply by eating a dish. Like a memory was like unlocked in my mind. Now, I'll even see things my parents do. If anybody knows my dad is super duper like, you want to talk about like a Japanese American, like he's definitely more on the American side, you know, like at least that's what I was convinced about my dad growing up. There's like things that I'm finding about my dad now. Like I don't even think he realizes how Japanese he truly is. There's things he does the longer I'm here, the more this picture is starting to be painted like, whoa, wow, now I know my dad does things the way he does. Or likewise, when we were kids, my mom always tried to make my sister and I, she tried her best to like preserve some of the customs, all the itadakimasu, all the gochiso-sama, you know, all these different types, you know, shichigo-san. She tried to send us to Kumon. We went through the Juku experience for a little bit, but the difference was, you know, we were doing it in America, so once I found that it was just too much, I was just like, screw this, I don't want to do this. All my friends, none of my friends are going to school on Saturdays. Why do I gotta go to school on Saturdays? Pokemon's on Saturdays, god damn it. Like, and I just see some of these things that are happening that really help me connect some dots with the past to today that I never would have really been able to appreciate if I had been in America. And so those were some of the things that I enjoyed. Here are some of the things that I had to accept as a Japanese American in Japan. And this is the fact that I will always be an outsider in both Japan and America. And what I mean by that is if I step outside the San Francisco Bay Area and I go, you know, because I've taken a road trip across the whole United States, I get the same looks if I pull up in a gas station somewhere in North Dakota or South Dakota or Texas that probably some of these foreigners are experiencing in Japan, pulling up into an Inaka town somewhere in Niigata. In America, clearly there's areas, of course, that I'm going to be considered an outsider. It's just a given. That was a concept that I had to learn and grow up with. Sometimes you're just not going to fit in, and that's cool. But the funny thing is the same argument will be said, people over here will never accept me as a Japanese anymore. My last workplace, there was a Japanese woman that I was working with who literally told me something along the lines of the words of, you don't belong in this country. And when I asked her what did she mean you don't belong in this country, she just said like, well, you look Japanese and it's really confusing for everyone here. And it must be so difficult for you. So what I mean is you belong in America. You don't belong here. Granted, she wasn't really the nicest lady to begin with, and we didn't have the best working relationship, but yeah, that's just something that I've had to sort of accept while I grew up here. Another thing that I've had to sort of learn to grow and accept is sometimes other foreigners are going to throw some shade at you. And what I mean by that is there's like this small percentage of foreigners that I've met out here that like, they get like either jealous or upset by the fact that like I am who I am, but I can still blend in public. There's some people who it's like their life goal to come to Japan and to be Japanese. I think a lot of these folks get their dream crushed upon coming here. And as soon as they realize that it's not easy for foreigners to assimilate, like the first thing that they want to do is just just point at me. Like if I'm another foreigner who's in the room as them, that I'll be at a restaurant and I'm given a Japanese menu and they're given the English menu, even though their Japanese is probably much better than mine. Some of these folks get pretty mad at me, and I try to. Some of these folks we can laugh it off, and then there's other folks who take it pretty personal, and it gets pretty uncomfortable for me because it's like I didn't really ask for this, but it's just the way it is. Some of the other fellow foreigners have even gone out of their way to say things to me like, "You'll never understand what it means to be a minority," but I've been a minority my whole life in America. So the girl who said that to me, it was her first day living in Japan. So you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of thing that I mean, is like sometimes I just get random shade thrown at me. Most of the time it's not that big of a deal, but this is just something I had to accept. And especially in like a homogenous society like Japan, I think one of the things that I really had to accept also is just the fact that Japanese people don't quite really understand the concept of Japanese America yet. There's a lot of learning opportunities to educate folks and sort of explain to them that I'm not half, or in their words, hafu is what they would call someone of mixed race. I am full-blooded Japanese, whether they like it or not. The one thing though, despite an explanation, despite me telling them again and again, even sort of drawing diagrams for them to show them, it's still very difficult for them to understand and grapple the fact that someone who's 4 generations deep in America can still have full Japanese blood within them. It's simply not just Japanese people, by no means, because I've talked to many different folks, foreigners included, who they still, in the end of the day, consider me like half. And I've just sort of had to like learn to accept and just go, okay, like, you know what? I'm done correcting you. I guess while I'm out here in Japan, I'm classified as half as long as I live in Japan as a Japanese American. It's not the case. But anyways, just to wrap everything up, personally, no matter what I'm saying, like, I understand and I know that I am here by choice. So yeah, if things don't work out here, then I can just always go back to America. I mean, whether I fit in 100% or not, that's a pretty damn awesome privilege to have. So I really can't complain about that. I think it's a really interesting ongoing narrative that's going on in this reverse immigration process per se. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's gonna happen in the future. Anyways, thanks for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed this video and you wanna see more content like this, shoot me a like, subscribe, comment below, and thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.